you for tuning in. The following letter was issued by One Nation Eritrea, and it was sent to the chairperson of the African Union today in response to the revealing of the Haile Selassie's statue in Addis Ababa. Your Excellency, today, February 10, 2019, the African Union decided to reveal the statue of former Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie at its headquarters complex in Addis Ababa. As Eritreans and fellow Africans, we are sending you this letter to express our disappointment and dismay at the message this utter disregard for the ideals of freedom and equality the African Union should stand for. Previously, many Africans, including many Ethiopians, have repeatedly warned the African Union not to take this measure that would undoubtedly tarnish the reputation of the AU and, more importantly, add insult to the injury caused by the regime of the late emperor. Unfortunately, the office of the chairperson has opted to disregard these very valid arguments, but we are afraid the AU seems not to have fully thought about the consequences of this symbolic gesture to future generations of Africa in general and the Horn region in particular. To clarify why we strongly feel you should take corrective action, here are a couple of our main points. 1. Haile Selassie should not be a symbol of Pan-Africanism. The late emperor's 44-year reign from 1930 to 1974 can only be described as feudal dictatorship, during which many atrocities took place in Eritrea and several places within Ethiopia, including Tigray, Wollo, and the Somali region. The king represented a bygone era where religious and ethnic minorities were discriminated against, economically marginalized, and even slave trade was openly practiced. Is this the kind of symbol you want the current and future generations of Africans to embrace and look up to? If the African Union wants a symbol of unity for Africa and its people, as its name implies, it looks utterly ridiculous to erect a statue of a man who considered himself and brainwashed others that he was elect of God, the descendant of the biblical King Solomon, or even a divinity, the incarnation of God himself. Unlike Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Haile Selassie was not a Pan-Africanist. He did not even consider himself black. He was simply a feudal king who sought to consolidate his power at the expense of his subjects, one who carefully created an image of himself that was far from reality. During his era, nowhere in the world was the gap between the poor and the rich greater than it was in Ethiopia. While millions landless farmers suffered, a small percentage of his close friends enjoyed luxurious lifestyles and extravagant banquets. It is a well-known fact that even he spent over $35 million for his lavish 80th birthday party, while at the same time trying to hide the horrendous famine in the province of Wollo and many other places in Ethiopia. This fact is well documented in films like The Unknown Famine by the British filmmaker Jonathan Dimbleby, which revealed to the world in 1973 what it was really like. King Haile Selassie was not a progressive, freedom-loving, equality-loving individual. It was indeed no surprise that the Ethiopian Revolution of 1974 erupted and the king was dethroned. For the sake of Africa and Africans, the romantic rewriting of this disgraceful history must stop. 2. Haile Selassie's regime has committed atrocities and massacred Africans. During Haile Selassie's reign, any resistance to his rule was met with brutal force. Student leaders and trade unionists were shot in public. Ethiopian revolutionary leaders were executed and their corpses displayed in public squares. Towns and villages were razed under the pretext of security. Free thinkers were jailed and tortured. In Eritrea, the killing and slaughtering of innocent civilians was even worse. After the systematic assassination of Eritrean nationalists who were calling for self-determination, using his influence, Haile Selassie imposed a federal arrangement that was later systematically abolished. Eritrea's existing democratic institutions were dismantled, and soon after, the country was illegally annexed as a province of Ethiopia. This short-sighted vision of the king led to the start of a 30-year war and suffering and death of hundreds of thousands who perished during the war. At that time, the then Organization of African Unity, OAU, became another instrument for the emperor who used it to silence the plight and aspirations of Eritreans. The OAU looked the other way then. It is a shame that the AU chooses to do the same today. There are numerous well-documented examples of massacres committed by the Haile Selassie regime in Eritrea. To name a few, on July 24, 1967, 170 Eritreans were brutally murdered in the small town of Hazamo. Later that year, 50 students were hanged in public in Aordat. On July 17, 1970, 60 elders were shot and killed in El Abared. On November 30, 1970, 120 members of the village of Beskidera were rounded up into a local mosque, and then the building was set on fire, killing everyone. And in one of the largest mass killings of innocent civilians in Eritrea, 625 men, women, and children in the village of Ana were summarily murdered and their village burned to the ground. Again, is honoring a man who oversaw the massacre the right thing to do for the African Union? Is there any consideration given to truth, justice, and the rights of Africans? Or is the African Union just a place for the elites to pat on each other's back with little consideration to the story and recent history of their citizens? Now, I'm sure you would agree that it is indeed a shame to add insult to the injury of many Eritreans by erecting a symbol of terror at the venue where freedom, equality, progress are supposed to be discussed. Africa is indeed endowed with many leaders who symbolized the new, forward-looking, dynamic, and bold vision of Pan-Africanism of yesterday, which can serve us well into the 21st century. Nelson Mandela represented that vision, and even Patrice Lumumba represented that vision, but definitely not Emperor Haile Selassie. Not Emperor Haile Selassie, the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I, King of Kings, elect of God. If that doesn't sound ridiculous and out of touch with the aspirations of today's generation and the challenges of yesterday's history, we don't know what could be more ridiculous. On this sad day of February 10, 2019, you have indeed unveiled the statue of a man who does not deserve the vision and mission of the African Union. Let us conclude by reminding you of another February 10th date. 29 years ago today, on February 10, 1990, brave Eritrean freedom fighters liberated the port city of Massawa. In the town square was also a statue of Haile Selassie. One of the first things they did, the freedom fighters did, was to destroy and remove the statue that was a symbol of terror, mass killing, and oppression. If not today, we are sure that future leaders of the African Union will come to terms with the truth and at the same time we do the same, or at least remove the ex-emperor's monument and move it to an appropriate museum where it belongs. We are also demanding that the Eritrean government issue a formal statement of objection with the African Union and honor the memory and sacrifice of Eritrean martyrs and their families. But so far, the government of Eritrea seems to have fallen asleep at the wheels and have failed to do its job. Nevertheless, the Eritrean people would not cease to defend their honor, sovereignty, and proper place among the nations of the world and among their fellow Africans. Respectfully, One Nation, Eritrea, February 10, 2019. Thank you.